Hello to all our listeners and welcome back to The Art Equation. It's Kim with a solo episode today and an update regarding the future of the podcast. We're really excited to share this episode with you, but we're also sad to announce that it will be our final one. Unfortunately, we don't have the resources available to produce a podcast and keep up the same standards of quality that we prioritize. We also want to wish Patricia a hearty congratulations on the final stages of your dissertation. Yay! And as we approach our 10-year anniversary of Now Be Here, we have some exciting projects in the works, so please check our website and social media for updates. Thank you, Patricia, Sky, and to our listeners for supporting us throughout this journey, and to all of our fabulous guests for trusting us with your stories. We are honored to have had a hand in sharing them. For now, let's get to our last episode. We'll see you in the future.
Welcome to The Art Equation, a podcast from Now Be Here. I'm one of your hosts, Patricia Ortega, and our historian and independent curator.
I'm your other host, Kim Schoenstatt, a contemporary artist and organizer of Now Be Here, a directory of and for women and non-binary artists.
On this podcast, we have a little charla, a little bachipapo about making art and making exhibitions. We invite fellow artists, curators, archivists, and people from different areas of the art world to share their knowledge and their experience.
We are curious about what goes on in the day-to-day of arting. We want to talk shop, get in the weeds about what goes into art shows, talk with the makers and the doers of the art world. Welcome to The Art Equation. Today we're chatting with Yayoi Shionoiri, and as usual, we're going to read a bio at the top of the episode so our listeners can get to know our fantastic guest for this episode. Yayoi is a lawyer and arts worker with over 2 decades worth of experience supporting artists and art world stakeholders. She is currently the VP of External Affairs and General Counsel at Powerhouse Arts, a nonprofit fabrication facility in Brooklyn with state-of-the-art equipment that allows artists the opportunity to work in different mediums. From 2019 to 2024, Yayoi served as executive director to the estate of Chris Burden and the studio of Nancy Rubins, where she was responsible for stewarding Burden's art historical legacy and promoting Rubins' artistic practice. From 2015 to 2019, Yayoi served as general counsel and head of Asia strategy to Artsy, responsible for all legal matters of the company's global operations, advising on corporate transaction, intellectual property issues, technology startup management, and operations and digital media strategy. From 2011 to 2015, Yayoi was the Associate General Counsel of the Solomon R. Guggenheim Foundation, providing legal services for matters including exhibitions and nonprofit operations. From 2008 to 2011, she served as legal advisor to Japanese contemporary artist Takashi Murakami, managing his contract negotiations and worldwide intellectual property rights. She also serves as a board director to the Asia Art Archive in America, a board director to the Holt Smith Foundation, U.S. Alliance partner to City Lights Law, a Japanese law firm that represents curators, innovators, and artists, and an outside board director to Startbahn, a Japanese blockchain company. She received her A.B. from Harvard University in 2000, her J.D. from Cornell Law School in 2003, and her M.A. from Columbia University in Modern Art in 2010. Yayoi has written about and presented throughout the world on legal issues related to copyright and contemporary art, AI and digital art, and ethics related to new technology. Welcome, Yayoi, to the podcast.
Hello, Kim. How are you doing? Thanks so much for having me today. And thank you also to the wonderful team behind Now Be Here Art, including Sky. It's so great to hear your voices.
Oh, we are so lucky to have you. Okay, wow. First of all, we've known each other for a little bit of time, but I had no idea. Like reading your bio, whoa. You've really experienced the whole gamut of the art world. I want to back up and share a little bit about your background because in previous chats, I didn't do this. And now I'm interested to hear about how people find their way into this art world.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for that, Kim, right? It's always sort of interesting for those of us who have had many, many tours of duty or have been on many rodeos and have managed to stay in the art world. And as we know, I think being an arts worker, it's a constant hustle to find the right kind of and fulfilling job. And so I also, like you, Kim, I also actually really love talking to people to be like, how did you come to the art world? Like, how do you have this job, right? And that's the case whether it's an arts worker, an artist, or even an arts worker who also has an artistic practice. And for me, I'm actually an art historian first. My jam is the contemporary art and politics of 1960s Japan. And I've actually always been super curious about structural frameworks as they affect contemporary practice. What do I mean by that? It's really sort of like, how do artists think about the world around them? How are they digesting the world around them, contextualizing what they see? And how does the current way in which they see the world around them affect their practice? And law, as a large structural framework, is one of those things. But when I was a baby person thinking about art history and then getting all nerdy and studying all of this, I actually had no idea how to turn it into a paying job, right? I'm a first generation immigrant. And I mean, yeah, there was a possibility that I could have gone to grad school and could have tried to get a PhD in art history, but I wasn't really sure if that was how I would eke out my career. And so when I was that young person, I said, well, maybe it's possible to bring a professional skill set to the art world. Maybe that'll make me more marketable as a person. And at that point, right, I didn't really know what that actually meant, right? I said, hey, like maybe I'll go to law school and I'll have a professional skill set. I can apply and make myself more marketable. But I didn't actually know, A, what art lawyers did, and B, how difficult it actually would be to try to be an art lawyer.
Okay, I giggled because when I entered the art world, I assumed it was professional. I assumed people had rules that they followed and there was a guidebook somewhere. And I quickly found out that nope, you just make it up as you go along. I mean, just context wise, of course, this was the 90s. So the professionalism was coming up. So, probably why we enjoy talking with each other is that there is this sort of, okay, we can do this better, folks. Like, there's a better way to do these things, and it's easy, and we can do it. Let's go.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think people sometimes scoff at the idea of professionalism, especially in creative industries. But at the end of the day, I like to believe, and one of the reasons why I'm still an art lawyer and why I still think legal structural frameworks can be important for the art world ecosystem, is that having scaffolding and having guardrails actually allows in some ways for creativity to take place in a more structured sort of way. Like, and I fully believe in that. And you're right, Kim. I mean, is the art world in some ways the most highly unregulated stakeholder industry ever? Absolutely, right? Is it hard for artists to ensure that they have the right legal protections or to be able to even work with lawyers, given how high some fees are for lawyers? Absolutely. But I will say, like, the longer I've been in the biz, shall we say, the more I am finding that there are arts workers and art support professionals who truly care about being in the art world and supporting artists. Some of those people that I want to just shout out, and I know, Kim, that you know some of these lovely, lovely folks too. Some art lawyers I love are Sarah Conley Odenkirk. She's the founder of Art Converge, and hat tip, she's actually the person that I think initially connected me to you, Kim.
Yep.
And Megan No, she's a partner in Pryor Cashman's Art Law Group. Both of them are thought leaders. They've been in the trenches for decades. They are both truly beloved and respected in the art community, all of which is so well deserved. So there are most certainly good eggs out there who really do want to try to apply, shall we say, their skills and talents and expertise to ensure that the art world remains a good place to be, especially for artists.
Like you mentioned, Sarah Conley Odenkirk introduced us. And at that point, you were working as the executive director for a major artist studio. Your career has moved from working with artist studios, like supporting singular artists, to institutions, and then your aperture seems to keep widening. So why is it important to you right now to keep widening your aperture of the types of places that you work with?
Yeah, huge thanks for that question. And I think if people want to know a little bit more about like how I came to where I am now, I don't want to bore this audience by saying the same sorts of things. So I would request that people check out Madison Beale's Artalogue podcast, where I kind of talk extensively about how I became an art lawyer. But what I think distinguishes me from other art lawyers is that, as you say, Kim, I am a bit of a hybrid. So not only do I advise on legal aspects, but I'm also a doer. I love doing things, whether that is managing projects, executing strategy, but also running around and helping to run events, right? And to specifically answer your question in terms of aperture, I think of it as a question of scale of stewardship. So it's not so much the size of the aperture per se, but it is actually sort of also about time too. So whether it's working for living artists or artist estates, whether it's working for an institution, at the end of the day, what I'm trying to still provide is something similar: structural frameworks, scaffolding to help the art world become a place that allows for artists to continue to be their best.
Oh, I love that. Because we need it. We need all the helpers. By the way, folks, we'll put the link to that podcast in our episode notes. One of the things that we did for this interview was to have a pre-interview because you have so much. It was hard to parse out how to narrow down and not have like a 5-hour conversation. So one of the things we talked about on Zoom in my studio, you saw a piece I was working on in the background, and the phrasing for that piece was misalignment of the possible. And you were like, this is something we need to talk about. And I think we both had very different reasons for wanting to talk about this thing that happens so much within the art world, this misalignment of the possible. For me, it's the moment when an artist feels like, oh, this should be possible. Why is this not possible? Why can't we just move a glacier into Arizona and have it sit and stay cold? For me as an artist, there's often that moment in exhibition prep when you're having a conversation with a curator and you're like, I want to do XYZ PDQ. And then they come back and say, okay, this is actually what we can do. But in legal services, this is like a memorandum of understanding. This is kind of what you want to get to.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. What I think is really interesting about the phrasing in Kim's piece, for me, is that there's actually a sense of time that's incorporated there, right? Namely that first there was an expectation of alignment about what's possible, but it actually turns out later on, unfortunately, that that was not the case, right? So for arrangements or projects that go haywire, usually things begin pretty well. They're okay, and they're ongoing. And then sometimes it's the case because the project also is really innovative and it's expected to produce something unknown. So it's groundbreaking and exciting, but the possible is so impossible to figure out that that's actually why down the line there might be a misalignment, right? And so you mentioned MOUs, and I like to call them letter agreements. Maybe they're called contracts, whatever we want to actually call them. The flip side is that there is always a possibility that the misalignment of the possible can in fact be staved off with a lot of conversation up front, transparent conversation up front, And then that transparent conversation is memorialized in some form of writing that serves to remind everybody about what was discussed. And again, all of this can be harder to capture because sometimes the project that gets embarked on is so new that it's hard to do so. But I'm always in favor of trying to figure things out beforehand and to try to see around the corner.
One of the things that is weird in the art world is when you do a gallery show, there isn't this setting up of expectations to begin with. There's an assumption. What has your experience been?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And I love it that you actually made a distinction between expectation and assumption, right? Because those are two different things. But I think one of the things that makes those two things different is vocalizing what those assumptions are. Because once the assumptions are vocalized to everybody in the room, then people can say, yes, my expectation matches that or not. And I would say, while I know this might be very difficult for some types of artists to advocate for themselves vis-a-vis their galleries, I think it's totally okay to ask about it. Ask those questions, right? You are bringing your artistic practice for the gallery to showcase. So what does that actually mean? Am I going to get an exhibition opening? Is it a solo show or is it a group show? If it's a solo show, am I going to get a dinner after the opening where I can either invite my friends or maybe we bring together a group of collectors? Is there going to be an opportunity for me, the artist, to do exhibition walkthroughs like during the run of the show? Are we going to do good photography? Are we going to maybe commission a young curator to do an exhibition blurb about me? Sometimes I think artists don't realize that they are allowed to ask for these things.
Right.
And I think it's one of those moments that artists need to be given the opportunity to ask whether or not their assumptions can be made agreed upon expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point because that is an awkward conversation, but you don't know it until you have it.
Right. And sometimes also I think maybe also it's not that the gallerist is necessarily skirting these conversations, but they just have never really had a chance to be as open about what happens in the making of a show too. Like, right? Like it's always sort of like a multi-directional street that these conversations need to happen on. These are dialogues and they're not one-way directional requests. So I certainly hope that artists feel that they are in a place of agency where they are in fact allowed to start the conversation.
Yeah.
Right. I think it is hard for many of us to ask, to vocalize our asks and our needs. But I also, for those of you who are kindly listening, who are artists, a reminder that we as arts workers won't be in this art world without you all and what you all make and what you all put out into the world and the messaging that you put out through your artwork. I mean, we would be out of jobs. Like we would be nowhere without our artists. And so I in some ways, I realize that this is hard and it's easy for me to say from the outside, but I think in some ways I want artists to be reminded that they actually have a voice and they have agency in asking when it comes to having their artwork be shown in different places.
Thanks, Yayoi. You always make me feel so like empowered.
That's what I like. It is my great honor to be able to feel like I can empower others to be their best.
Well, one thing you just said actually kind of tipped me onto this thought, but you know, this summer we've had major shifts in the art world, and it feels a little bit like industrial growing pains, and you've had experience with many aspects of the art world and have seen it grow. What's your take?
Yeah, well, I am going to disclaim myself like a proper lawyer and say I'm not a market economist, but I have seen a lot, right? You and I, Kim, we've been around the block quite a lot, and hopefully it makes us wiser each and every time we go through these things. The market, I do think, is cyclical. I think we have both seen ups and downs. And the question, I think it becomes, is this one different in particular, and in what sorts of ways, right? As examples, in the past couple of weeks, we've had big galleries announce their closings. We've had fairs announce that they are canceling their upcoming iterations, right? We've had other galleries announce that they are changing up their ownership structure and starting out under a new title. So that's happening as I'm seeing it in the art world. And then, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that there is a rather tumultuous political climate, both domestically and internationally, right? So there's a lot of things at stake. There's a lot of things that are making this particular context slightly different. But what I'm more interested in is what happens, I think, from all of these tectonic shifts regarding the art world and the ecosystem. What sorts of new potential models come up that ask new questions and potentially provide new solutions. And here, if I may, I actually want to discuss Powerhouse Arts a little bit and its attempt to produce and put on its own fairs. So as you kindly pointed out, Kim, Powerhouse Arts is a nonprofit and it is a fabrication facility first. We have state-of-the-art equipment and expert fabricators who help artists actualize their creative expression in materiality that includes textiles, ceramics, digital print, as well as large-scale site-specific public art installations. But also what we're doing is we're trying to be able to showcase some of the incredible fabrication that happens in a more public way, which is why we decided to start our inaugural year of fairs. And so in March, we had our first ever Brooklyn Fine Art Print Fair that featured galleries with print specialties, as well as artists self-representing, as well as art schools who brought their art students who sold their print editions.
That's so cool.
Thank you. And then in early summer, we had a little preview tasting of what we hope will be a full-fledged fair that will take place next year. But the preview iteration is called Conductor, and it's a fair for the global majority, featuring and focusing on voices from the global majority, with the hope eventually that if we have enough time to work with our galleries for Conductor, that in fact more and more galleries and their artists perhaps might be able to consider fabricating their work locally so that they do not need to create the work internationally and ship the work, but perhaps they rely on Powerhouse Arts for some of their fabrication needs in order for the work already to be locally available when the fair starts up. Why am I talking about these fairs? For us, for Powerhouse as a nonprofit, it's very important to ensure that the fairs are economically accessible, both for people who kindly come to the fairs, so collectors and visitors, but also for the fair participants themselves in terms of their booth participation fees. And just saying at the end of the day, like recognizing that our global art fair calendar may not necessarily be economically tenable for many of the galleries that feel like they have to participate. And so while we don't have any answers, again, we're trying to pose some new questions about the fair model.
It's interesting because I think that really does nicely dovetail into this question of what's going on this summer in the art world. Like what you're talking about is this professionalization of the art world. Now we're right back to why you got into this game to begin with, right? Like let's grow up a little bit. Let's find different avenues of being professional. Let's find different ways to get our work into the world. I have to say, I definitely have a lot of FOMO with Powerhouse Arts. I really want one in LA. Just the idea of having this sort of magic space where artists could book time and come in and consult and make projects sounds so incredible. And I love this idea of the local art fair. LA did have that at some point, and it did kind of fizzle out for whatever reasons. It's so important to have this kind of financially accessible model that artists and the galleries and the different art schools can all come together and find commonality and share what we do with the world. That's incredible.
I appreciate you saying that. And it just must mean, Kim, that therefore you must therefore spend more time on the East Coast. I think that's what that really means.
Oh, don't tempt me. But I do want to get back to a little bit of your career. So you have all these different muscles, right? You've worked out in all these different areas of the art world. You've had all these different positions ranging from Artsy to the Guggenheim to individual artist studios to being on boards. It feels like you're always focused on artists, but in different facets.
Yeah, that's true. And some of that I think is innovation by necessity. We are coming back again to the fact that being an arts worker is hard. Finding arts worker jobs that are not only fulfilling, but matches and aligns with one's skills and is a tenable career, I think that can actually be very, very difficult. So in some ways, I've had to hustle for each and every job I've had the honor of doing. But every job has allowed me to learn, make a lot of mistakes, but always hopefully like add a little bit more of what I know and also what I know I don't know to my toolkit, right? And I don't at all take it lightly that I get to work with artists like you, Kim, and your artistic practice. Like, I don't take that lightly. I mean, this is why I'm in it, and this is why I love it so much. But whether that's helping someone make their work, exhibit their work, whether it's helping someone think about what their legacy could be, or even whether it's thinking about the stewardship of legacy longer term, like those for me are all, yes, for sure, different facets. But at the end of the day, something that is very standard across everything that I try to do, which is really try to be an art support and an arts worker in service of artists.
It's interesting. And I know this isn't like a question I had tossed out before, but the artist's legacy and preparing for legacy, again, coming back to all of this stuff that's happened in the art world this summer and seeing these places close, it does make me think about permanence, and it does make me think about planning for the future. In your experience, what was something that people have done right in setting up their legacy for ease of transition?
That is such an important question, but a very difficult question. I think that could also be like another podcast, like unto itself, I think. But I think the answer that I will give you, Kim, is exactly this though. Like the ability to have a conversation, I think is the most important thing. And death and transcendence is something that I think all cultures and all religions have different explanations for why it happens, and how we deal with grief or how we deal with moving on when somebody transcends. And of course, that is not my specialty, and I'm not ready to talk about that right now. But I think, especially when it comes to artists, thinking about it early enough so that it's not scary, I think is important. And again, like I will say, this is not about all of a sudden being like, let me go try to set up a structure, a legal structure, or let me go talk to my accountant first. I think, yes, eventually one might want to do that. But I think the first thing is to say, what is important to me as an artist? What would make me happy looking down from wherever I am, like way down the line? What would make me smile about how I am remembered, if at all? Right? And it could be like, I want to be remembered because I gave away all my works after I transcended to all of my best friends. Maybe it's going to make me happy because my art is not what is left, but it actually eventually got monetized somehow, and it was then used to support like the creation of like a teaching artist position in a college or high school that's important to me. I think there are actually all sorts of creative ways in which artists can be remembered. And the more that an artist can try to vocalize that, and again, put it down in writing, we keep coming back to this writing thing, trying to notate that, to be like, I would be happy if X, Y, and Z. I think that artist's intent will serve both the artist as they continue to think about their legacy while they're still with us, but also sort of after the artist has transcended and somebody else is trying to take care of whatever is considered the estate.
Yeah, that's a good point, because like they're not mind readers, so you do have to leave some breadcrumbs.
Yeah, you got to leave the more breadcrumbs you leave, the better, I think, right? And I think that's actually the case, though, for people who, not just artists, but ordinary humans who transcend too.
Yeah, that's true. That is very true. I want to dip back into Powerhouse Arts because it's such a crazy, incredible place. You've been working there for a little bit, and I was wondering if you could share some of your favorite moments so far.
Yeah, I love the day to day of getting to see our fabricators make work with our artists. I mean, being near making and being near creativity really reminds me, even in my toughest days, like why I get to do what I do. I'm actually always really surprised still when even an art person says to me openly, like, what does a fabricator do? How do fabricators and artists work together? What actually happens? And I think it's an honest question, but I think it reminds me that the myth of like a lone artist making everything with their bare hands is still very much a stereotype that some people think about. Even though, right, historically, we have so many examples of artists either working in a studio system, i.e., with apprentices, or alongside expert fabricators to undertake their practice. So, examples of things I get to see on a day to day basis and I get to support. It's, for example, the print shop screen printing a large scale print with over 75 applications of color. It's seeing, for example, the digital print shop printing on innovative substrates like glass, which then those glass pieces are then sent to our public art shop to create these moiré three-dimensional sculptures. It's, for example, seeing like the ceramics shop creating intricate elements to be incorporated into a large scale three-dimensional work of a contemporary artist. It's also things like textile fabricators applying fringe elements to a paneled textile mural for a contemporary artist. These are all examples of things that are happening right now at Powerhouse. And again, sort of like to be reminded that creative expression happens in different materials and lots of people involved in making an artist's creative expression come true.
Does witnessing that and seeing how they work and seeing how the sausage is made, for lack of a better phrase, but does that help you be more creative in your work?
Thanks so much for that. Does it help me be more creative in my lawyering? Not necessarily directly so. But I think it reminds me that as an art lawyer who works with artists, it is important to try to maintain that creative spirit in my day to day. And in fact, that is actually the form of creativity, maybe, that I help to bring to the art world in my small way.
Another thing that you just talked about that I actually wanted to loop back into was that the not understanding what the different parts of the art world do. And previously we were talking about the assumptions, right? Like a lot of people have a lot of assumptions about the art world, but there isn't a lot of clarity about how the art world actually functions and works and who does what. We did an interview with Matilda at the Dia Foundation. She's the curator there, and it was called What Do Curators Do All Day? Because like my sister didn't really understand what a curator does, and it's a little hard for me as an artist to explain it. So there is like this opacity to the art world that we're a profession, but then nobody really understands what each other does.
Yeah, and I would say like that is the case, I think, even for deep subject matter experts in the art world too. You know, it's not just like my mom and dad who aren't in the art world who don't know what curators do or who don't know what development directors do or you know, what audience engagement looks like in museums. I think it's actually ironically that there are members of the art world stakeholders who don't necessarily understand what each of us do. And I don't know what to do about that necessarily, except to continue to have these kinds of conversations. You know, if I don't know, that it's okay to not know and just be like, what in fact do you do as an archivist? Or what in fact do you do as a color separator, right? Like there are all these like incredibly, right?
Exactly.
Right? There are like these incredibly detailed, wonderful jobs in our art world. And just to know better, like I love that you asked a curator what they do do all day, because I imagine each of their days are so different and they do actually a lot of everything.
Right.
To the point that actually in Japan, Japanese curators often joke amongst themselves that they're the people that are just the runts of the museum, because they just kind of are the catch-all and they're expected to do everything. And there's actually this like very specific word that they use, which almost sounds kind of like the word curator, but it's not. And so I guess that maybe is actually a universal question and an inside joke amongst all international parts of the art world too.
Yeah, but it goes back to this professionalization. The art world has always just kind of cobbled it together, right? Museums were started with like, okay, we're going to put stuff in a room. Okay, now we need somebody to dust the stuff. Okay, now we need somebody who's better at dusting. Okay, we'll call that person a conservator. Okay, now we need somebody who can arrange the stuff. Okay, we'll call that person a curator. It's kind of organically grown, but there's no tight little bow.
There's something to be said, though, I think, about like ideally that kind of DIY spirit continues, obviously, right? Because I think that is the sort of thing that also sparks and continues to spark innovation, sparks creativity. So while I consider myself to be a professional with a specific set of skills and tools in my toolkit, I do want the art world to still recognize that like it's full of weird and wild corners with people doing weird and wild things. And I think that's also there's something kind of like very special about that too.
Absolutely. And the build it yourself attitude, like the go do it yourself. Like you didn't get into that gallery? Well, start your own. You have a closet, let's go. And that was actually one of the interesting points about the Anonymous Was a Woman report that just came out this year, which was basically that women artists don't feel like they are well taken care of. So they do tend to form their own networks and communities to make up that difference.
Yeah, and networks and communities can come together in different ways and stay together for different points in time and then move on too, right? And that I think is actually, when I think about this scoping out, that for me is the most ideal form of artist collectives, that they come together for a set amount of time because there's a need for it, or there's sort of an impetus for coming together. And then at a certain moment, the acknowledgement that it's not working for everybody, and then people move on. I think that is actually okay as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because that, I mean, and that is something that I was thinking about with this sort of series of galleries closing, is that like maybe we put unnecessary ideas onto the galleries, that they should be around forever, that there isn't this natural birth, life, death cycle.
I think that's probably true. And like, I do hope that the artists for whom their main gallery, if their main gallery is moving on, that they feel like there will be some sort of plan for them, whether that is through the old gallery or starting anew, that it is a time of change. And in some ways, I guess, for better or for worse, we expect our artists to be super resilient. And I know that's probably an unfair assumption that I'm making about sort of the resilience and creativity of our artists. But hopefully the artists do get to feel like they will survive this like another sea change, and that things are beyond and there's something new beyond.
Oh, yeah, Yayoi, this has been fantastic. I want to be mindful of your time. Just thank you so much. It's always so delightful to talk with you.
It is always a delight and a great honor, Kim. You are an incredible artist, but you also do so much for the community. And so it is a great honor to be in conversation with you, both in private and in public ways like this.
Thank you. Okay, so our listeners know this by now, but we have a question that we bring back for each guest. Feel free to be as expansive as you want. It's very open-ended. The question is, what project would you do if you had unlimited funding and time?
Yeah, so my answer to this, it doesn't require time on my part, but it requires funding to come from another source. I'd like to make all museums free admission. Economic barriers to entry are real, and getting people into the habit of seeing and experiencing art is also real. And I really believe that the earlier one is afforded that opportunity, the more it will have a chance of sticking with you, right? Nerdiness is cultivated, and it needs to be so, and I'm fully appreciative of that. So there's already a time commitment involved in going to museums, And so why, if I don't yet know if I like the experience of looking at, seeing art, thinking about art, why should I also have to expend financial resources? And so for me, I really like to think that museums are a public good and we should find a way to fund them. Now, I'm cognizant that some museums offer free admission on certain days or all the time because of the generosity of private individuals and corporate benefactors. That is a good start. But I think it should be so across the board and funded not just by the beneficence of a selected group in the United States.
Amazing. Yes, can we make that happen?
Yes, I would love to make that happen. So it doesn't require time on my part, but it requires funding from somebody else. So those of you who are out there listening to this incredible podcast, yes, if you hear my plea and you would like to help manifest it, let's make it happen.
Hear, hear. Thank you again, Yayoi. You're just such a joy.
Thank you, dear Kim. It is a joy to be in community with you.
And finally, we're going to wrap up with some thank yous. Thank you, Yayoi Shionoiri, for coming to the podcast. Thank you, Sky Park Tausig, for being an amazing producer. Thank you, Taras Matla at the University of Maryland Art Gallery, and Jonathan Furmansky for letting us use your music. Thank you to our listeners, and again to Yayoi Shionoiri for speaking with us today. Hi folks, Kim jumping back in here to provide 2 quick corrections. In reading Yayoi's bio, the correct pronunciations of 2 mentions are Takashi Murakami and the Holt Smithson Foundation. Thanks again for listening.
We are The Art Equation. You can find us wherever you listen every other Thursday.
Thanks for being here with us. We'd really love to hear your thoughts. So please subscribe. And if you have a moment to leave a review, it really helps us out. We love the feedback. Talk to you soon here on The Art Equation. The Art Equation is a podcast from Now Be Here with support from the University of Maryland Art Gallery. Now Be Here is a directory and resource created by and for women and non-binary artists. You can find more information at www.nowbehereart.com.